Niti Driksalila Virananda Kunde Sagoshamni Majantam Akyapayantam Tariye Shitakeshu Bhakta Chitatvam Puna Prema Tastam Satavriti Vande Varam Deva Moksham Na Mokshavatim Va Na Chanyam Vineham Varesharapiha Nidam te vapurnata gopala bala Sadame manasya virastam kimanyay Nidam te mukam bojam matantanilai Ritam kuntalai snigdharaktaischa gopya Muhustum bitam bimbaraktadarame Manasya virastamalam lakshalabhai Namo Deva Damodarananta Vishnu Prasida Prabho Dukha Jalabdhi Magnam Kripa Drishti Vishchati Dinam Bhatanu Vihanesha Mamagya Medakshi Drishya Kuveratma Jopadha Murjayvayadvat Vayamochito Bhakti Bhajokitoja Tata Prema Bhaktim Svakame Prayachta Namokshe Graho Mesti Tamodareha Namaste Studamne Spuradiptidamne Pariyodarayata Vishvasya Damne Namararikaya Tvadiya Priyaya Namo Nantalilaya Devaya Tubhyam Namo Radhikaya Tvadiya Priyaya Namo Nantalilaya Devaya Tubhyam Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radhe Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radhe Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radhe To the Supreme Controller, who possesses an eternal form of blissful knowledge, whose glistening earrings swing to and fro, who manifested himself in Gokula, who stole the butter that the gopis kept hanging from the rafters of their storerooms, and who then quickly jumped up and ran in retreat in fear of Mother Yashoda, but was ultimately caught. To that Supreme Lord Sri Damodara, I offer my humble obeisances.
O Lord, although you are able to give all kinds of benedictions, I do not pray to you for liberation, nor eternal life in Vaikuntha, nor any other boon. My only prayer is that your changed pastimes may constantly appear in my mind. O Lord, I do not even want to know your features, Paramatma. I simply wish that your changed pastimes may ever be enacted in my heart.
O Lord, O Lord, although you are able to give all kinds of benedictions, O Lord, the cheeks of your the cheeks of your blackish lotus face, which is encircled by locks of curling hair, have become reddened like bimba fruit due to Mother Yashoda's kisses. What more can I describe than this? Millions of opulences are of no use to me, but may this vision constantly remain in my mind.
O unlimited Vishnu, O Master, O Lord, be peace upon me. I am drowning in the ocean of sorrow and the sunset of death. Please shower the rain this morning, uplift me and protect me with your eternity.
Cursed stands trees, you gave him Jaya Radha. Actually, I'm going to skip that part today. Because we already sang the Damna Rasakam, it's a little late. Om Agyantaminandasya Gunanjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swabadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyarevacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 15, Verse 11. Was the verse not written on the board? Probably not. Anyways, this might be okay because we Chandam Si. Nope. Okay. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: although King Gaya had no personal desire for sin's gratification, all his desires were fulfilled by virtue of his performance of Vedic rituals. All the kings with whom Maharaj Gaya had to fight were forced to fight on religious principles. They were very satisfied with his fighting, and they would present all kinds of gifts to him. Similarly, all the Brahmanas in his kingdom were very satisfied with King Gaya's magnificent charities. Consequently, the Brahmanas contributed a sixth of their pious activities for King Gaya's benefit in the next life. Purport: as a Kshatriya or emperor, Maharaj Gaya sometimes had to fight with subordinate kings to maintain his government, but the subordinate kings were not dissatisfied with him because they knew that he fought for religious principles. Consequently, they accepted their subordination and offered all kinds of gifts to him. Similarly, the Brahmanas who performed Vedic rituals were so satisfied with the king that they very readily agreed to part with the sixth of their pious activities for his benefit in the next life. Thus, the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas were all satisfied with Maharaj Gaya because of his proper administration. In other words, Maharaj Gaya satisfied the Kshatriya kings by his fighting and satisfied the Brahmanas by his charities. The Vaishyas were also encouraged by kind words and affectionate dealings. And due to Maharaj Gaya's constant sacrifices, the Shudras were satisfied by sumptuous food and charity. In this way, Maharaj Gaya kept all the citizens very satisfied. When Brahmanas and saintly persons are honored, they part with their pious activities, giving them to those who honor them and render them service. Therefore, stated in Bhagavad Gita 4.34, Tavidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. One should try to approach a spiritual master submissively and render service unto him. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay. Well, the simple point is Maharaj Gaya was able to please everyone. The king is called as Naradeva. Maybe you already read something like that. The king is called as Naradeva. He's a representative of God on the material platform. I think that was the language Prabhupada used. And so, just as God is able to satisfy everyone, so also those who represent Him truly, they are also able to satisfy everyone. Well, at least in Satya Yuga, and other yugas, in Kali Yuga, no matter what you do, it seems people will remain dissatisfied on account of their irreligiosity. Because it's being mentioned here, when Maharaj Gaya would defeat the kings, they would still be satisfied with him. Now in Kali Yuga, I don't know if that would be, it probably wouldn't work so effectively. You get into a fight with someone and you lose and you're still satisfied with them. And the reason that it's mentioned that they were satisfied with him is because he fought for religious principles. So he fought for the true. Satyam eva jayate, may the truth prevail. So they were happy with him. And on account of being happy with him, they would present him all types of gifts after losing. That's incredible. And the Brahmanas, because of his charities, the king will levy taxes, as mentioned, just as the sun takes water from the earth planet. The sun takes water from the earth planet and then showers the water back onto the earth planet and profuse rainfalls. So in the same way, the kings would levy taxes on the people only so that they could benefit them later by various charities and sacrifices. Therefore, everyone was so pleased with the king on account of that, and there would be no dissatisfaction in the kingdom. Now they just levy taxes and they split it amongst themselves. So naturally there's great dissatisfaction in the country and chaos all over the world. But due to his working for the benefit of the Brahmanas, they would give 1/6 of their pious activities for his benefit in the next life. In that way, the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas remain satisfied. They're the most important aspects for the upkeep of the society in a traditional varnashram sense, because the Brahmanas give the vision for the society and the Kshatriyas implement it. So they're considered like two pillars for the upkeep of the society. Of course, Vaishyas and Shudras are also essential in a traditional varnashram culture, but the most important were the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas, because the Brahmanas have the proper vision by which the whole society can be progressive. The Kshatriyas implement that. So he satisfied the Kshatriyas by defeating them in battle, and for religious principles. And he satisfied the Brahmanas by giving excessive charities. So they showered the blessings upon him, by which he is benefited in the next life. And then so Prabhupada highlights this particular point, that when you serve great personalities, Brahmanas, or saintly persons, then by their power you are able to improve something in spiritual life. Oftentimes we think that our endeavor counts for everything in Krishna consciousness. Of course it counts for something. It's not like it's not important. But ultimately the real method of progress is getting the blessings of saintly persons, because they're the persons who carry the spiritual potency within them. Bhakti is, no one can be devotional. I've been mentioning this a lot in the recent days. No one can just be devotional. Our chanting, our hearing, our remembering is generally referred to as bhakti in practice. It's not real bhakti at all, because real bhakti is actually a spiritual potency. It's a transformation of Krishna's Swarup Shakti. Swarup Shakti means potency. Swarupa means a potency coming from his own Swarup. Rupa, Swarup, his own form. So it's a potency coming from his own form that is impregnated into the living entity who is properly attuned at a certain stage of evolvement. So no one can be, it's nothing like you can just be devotional. We can be determined to get our consciousness to be attuned to receive the benediction of spiritual potency from the Supreme Lord. And that too, it doesn't come directly from the Supreme Lord, because he's not aware of us in the material world, because he's too busy playing around in the spiritual world to be aware of the plight of the conditioned souls in the material world. So the way he comes to know of the plight of the conditioned souls is due to the influence of saintly persons who already possess that spiritual power. They are present in the material world, and they're conscious of the living entities and the plight on the lack of Krishna consciousness. So therefore, because bhakti moves in its own way, just as Krishna is independent, bhakti is also independent. Ahaituki or pratiyata. So bhakti is also causeless and independent. So it moves in its own way, just as Krishna moves in his own way. And it moves through the presence of saintly persons in the material world who possess such spiritual power. So then they have to glance upon us and bestow upon us their spiritual power in order for us to actually get the real thing. That is, and of course, if our conscience is properly attuned by our endeavor to chant and to try to remember Krishna, the basic elements of sadhana bhakti, the various angas, that is just simply to make us attuned. The living entity is constitutionally fit only to be a receptacle of mercy. He's not constitutionally fit for anything else. And that mercy has to come from a devotee who's possessing bhakti, which is a spiritual power coming from the form of Krishna, a transformation of his Hladini Shakti. So then if we can please them, if they shall be satisfied with us, then they bestow upon us all sorts of goodies. The best one being bhakti, devotional power, that's why their body is said to be spiritual, because they're invested with spiritual potency. Although the body goes through various transformations, but because there's the presence of Swarup Shakti in them, so their bodies are considered Chidanandamaya, a spiritual body, as Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami. So Prabhupada seems to be highlighting on this point of because Maharaj Gaya got the blessings of the great souls, so he was benefited tremendously in the next life. Tavidi pranipatena paripashrana sevaya. This is the dakshina you should have to offer to the guru, the Sadguru who is possessing spiritual power. We offer him dakshina at the time of initiation. Upadekshanti. Tegyana. Upadekshanti means he initiates, actually. Upadekshanti means he initiates, if you see the word-to-word meaning in that verse. Tavidi pranipatena paripashana sevaya upadekshanti. He initiates. So you have to give dakshina, just like we see at the time of initiation, all the devotees going around with their chadars like this to gather, hundreds of dollars, ideally. As much as you can get at least. And then you want to bring it to the guru. Sometimes if another devotee's got like a huge bundle and you only got a few dollars, you feel a little bad. I'm not a sincere disciple. And therefore I got to let me go outside and see if I can get some more. Or sometimes, I know some devotees, they made a whole bunch of money before the initiation, just in case. I saw that, actually, that happened in my initiation, one of my godbrothers. He did like that, made a whole lot of money, because he's like, I don't know anyone, so they're not going to be inclined to give me so much. And then he just poured that in there, and offered it to the guru. Okay, that's a nice dakshina, undoubtedly. But the dakshina you're supposed to be offering is these three things. Tavidi pranipatena pariprashrana sevya. This is a statement of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. You're supposed to offer your submission, relevant inquiry, and service to the spiritual master. That's the method of pleasing him by which he bestows upon us spiritual empowerment in progressive degrees, by which we actually become Krishna conscious. That mercy is absolutely essential for the advancement of the disciple. Otherwise, repeated birth and death continues until that dawns in his consciousness for the necessity of actually receiving the mercy of Sadguru. Not just a ritual like we sometimes tend to do, oh Prabhuji, give me your mercy, but in actual substance, which is not always easy because then they might actually give you some service. And that can be a little agitating, depending on the nature of what the instruction is. So then the king was wonderful because he could please everyone, primarily the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas, so the society completely prospered. Was there one other point in this way? Yeah, in this way, Maharaj Gaya kept all the citizens very satisfied. So that is the king's business, or the leader's business, to keep all the people satisfied. Of course, in the age of Kali, like I already mentioned, that you're going to be hard-pressed to do that because people are unadvanced. So therefore, in unadvanced consciousness, they usually allow themselves to become absorbed in very superficial and petty things by which they cannot be satisfied. So it's tough. In the age of Kali, it's quite tough. But, leaders, they have to be able to minimally set the proper example of, I just wrote a letter about this, in terms of participation and programs so people have their faith in them. And they have to be able to also inculcate the spiritual conclusion. They have to see to it that people are making advancement. It can't just be like people are coming to the program, therefore they must be advancing. That's not true. Because actually we don't advance just by attending the program. That's a support. But just to think that I'm going to advance simply by chanting rounds and coming to the morning program following regular principles, that's true. You may make some solid advancement just because it's a mode of goodness lifestyle. But to think like that is niyamagraha, that just by doing that I'm going to be progressing, because you have to be attentive to what's actually happening to the consciousness. That is the main thing, the whole idea of following the rituals of Krishna consciousness, what is taking place with the consciousness. So if I'm following the program but I'm seeing my consciousness not improving, something is amiss. So then the leaders have to see to it, those who are in leadership positions, their service, which is very tough, is seeing to that people are actually advancing. And they can't just be satisfied with the fact that people are showing up for the rudimentary programs and therefore they must be advancing. The way you can understand where someone is at, it's very difficult, in fact, nearly impossible, especially if we're immature in our devotion, to understand who is in what position. And to try to speculate about it is very dangerous. You're on the verge of committing offenses and you can fall down. But primarily, what is the ideal that they speak? That's how you understand. Prabhupada has always taught us that the speech of a saintly person or any person is the most important quality, because by that you can understand a lot about the consciousness. Not always, but quite a bit can be understood just by the speech alone. What is their ideal? When sadhus speak, their speech is not different from Krishna. It is Krishna appearing as a Shabda avatar, an incarnation of sound vibration. So when they express their ideal, it is a manifestation of Krishna, actually. That's described in Chaitanya Bhagavatam. And so just as Krishna is all attractive, when the sadhu speaks, everything he speaks is all attractive, because it's not different from Krishna. The ideal that he disseminates is of such beauty that it draws us in and inspires our surrender. Because that's the way beauty works, isn't it? When you see a beautiful woman or a beautiful man, or you hear beautiful sounds, etc., what does it do? It draws you in and obliges your subsequent subordination, isn't it? It's like if you see, let's say, a beautiful girl, you get drawn in and then you bow your head, and start acting like a dog or something like that. In the modern context, that goes on, or vice versa, for example. Or you hear beautiful music and you get drawn into the sound vibration, and then sometimes you can't move. You just got to hear it for some time. Isn't it? You have experience like this? At least, maybe not so much as devotees, but before we were non-devotees, sometimes you may be hearing a song and you may be doing some work and hearing the music, and you're like, man, this is my jam. Huh? The prasadam hall. Yeah, for example, beautiful preparation. Yeah, like that, the smells. Sometimes you're upstairs in the ashram and you're doing some work, and you're like, whoa, what is that? And then you get captivated for about 2-3 minutes. And maybe so captivated that you just start walking downstairs. You gotta find out what it is. So that's the nature of beauty. It draws you in and inspires your subordination. Otherwise, we're always thinking we're kings. But then when you see something beautiful, you're inspired to become surrendered, subordinate. So also the conception of the sadhu, what he speaks, is of such beauty that it draws you in and inspires your surrender. And that way you come to know something of a saintly person. So similarly, for those of us who are not saintly, the same is true. When we speak, our ideal is conveyed. And we many times inadvertently reveal what is our consciousness, even without wanting to do so. And in that way, the leader understands, oh, this person is really neophyte, although he's been coming to the program for 5 years. His consciousness is really unevolved. I need to figure out how to improve that. And he can understand by what he's speaking, his ideal. Otherwise, any one of us can put on a good show by showing up. And we should put on a good show also for the pleasure of the deities. That's not unimportant. But that's not the essence. Finally, the essence is the ascendancy of our consciousness. Prabhupada says in the 4th canto in the Dhruva Maharaj pastime, the spiritual master is pleased by the ascendancy of the disciple, how he's advancing. And that means primarily, how is he advancing in terms of his ideal or spiritual conception, and not just in terms of the externals. Otherwise, we become like the Christians. As long as we believe in some rituals, then we're going back, which is hardly the teaching in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna's pretty fair. He says, what's your consciousness like? That puts everything on equal footing. What is your consciousness? And so it's very individual as far as Krishna is concerned. So the leader has to see to it that everyone is elevating. Otherwise, it would be impossible to satisfy them ultimately. If people are unevolved, there's no question of satisfying them because of their cripple-mindedness will not allow them to do so. So leaders, trying their best, of course, to educate, but also to elevate. Education is one thing, but helping people elevate is usually, I don't want to say it's not a separate department as such, but it doesn't necessarily follow just by understanding the philosophy theoretically people are elevating. In fact, they might be degrading, as it can be seen in certain cases where people become very proud. I know this, I know that, and then they deviate. So it's not like educate and then subsequently what follows is elevation. It doesn't happen like that. Practically, shiksha is required from point A to point B. Point A of our starting point in Krishna consciousness to point B of spiritual realization. So much guidance is required. Our will, we use our free will to decide what is best for us, isn't it? But unfortunately, our will is too minute to guide us. I read this statement somewhere. I thought that was a beautiful statement. It made a lot of sense. Although we depend on our will, our free will, for selection of our own good, selection for our own good. But unfortunately, our free will is too minute to guide us. And if it weren't the case, we would know immediately what is best for us, but we don't. So therefore, shiksha is required from beginning to end. So the leaders, they have to provide that shiksha generally. In our institutional structure, they're supposed to be doing that. But everyone may not be having that free flow of faith towards the leader in terms of their spiritual evolvement. That is to be seen oftentimes. So they have to respect their leadership in terms of at least the managerial structure and so on. They can't just be doing their own program and so on. But finally, there has to be room for the free flow of faith. Okay, who do you have faith in? Because you have to get guidance in order to advance. Otherwise, you remain neophyte forever, even if you are doing so much. So therefore, there has to be room for the free flow of faith and encouraging people to take shelter wherever their faith is actually guiding them to. That can be a little crazy because Westerners are like prostitutes. Running, many times it can be seen running here and there. But this is the true principle. Because if people don't have faith, finally they're not going to listen to you. They may be respectful because they better if they don't want to commit offenses and degrade their spiritual life. But they won't be able to follow your ideal. So then that has to be considered in terms of the welfare of the individual. And this way, to be a leader is damn hard. It's pretty tough. And probably not desirable for anyone who gets a list of the duties. Probably not desirable, and yet some people will be forced into that position by divine providence, and this is what the duty calls for. So these are some ideas. Anyone wants to ask any questions? Siddharth Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thanks a lot for the class, and thanks a lot for stressing the duty of the leaders to see actually where the devotees are going as opposed to saying that they're just attending the programs and so on. I was talking with Nityan Prabhu on a similar thing, and he was explaining that in devotional circle it's like a network of connections. It's not like a tree where you're just connected to your guru and that personality takes the entire responsibility. It's more like a tree where, in my particular case, I feel that it's not possible for whoever is my spiritual master, who I'm aspiring from, to take the complete responsibility. My understanding is that he spends sufficient time with the Bhakta leader, the temple commander, and the temple president. And they also, I think, in terms of day-to-day life, I think it's more their responsibility than the leader in terms of the GBC or guru.
So then they are also leaders.
Yeah.
So that doesn't contradict anything.
No, I'm just
Yeah. But also we have to remember the other element which I mentioned is the faith of the individual. So it's not like I joined the temple, here are the leaders in place for this particular temple, and therefore they will be the ones to guide your spiritual life. That's nice if it would work out theoretically like that, that would be awesome. But the reality is, does the individual have faith in them? Because ultimately the faith is the free flow of faith is the only way they're going to be able to assimilate anything from the individual. Otherwise they can't assimilate much if they don't have faith. Their minds will always be plagued by doubts, which can never be satisfied on account of their not having faith. So that element has to be an important consideration. Again, these leaders, in a very broad sense perhaps, are shiksha gurus. So when we say guru or leader, guru tattva is one. So shiksha guru, diksha guru, they're all one category. And they're all in the main qualification from our side is our faith. That is what's going to help us assimilate their ideals that they speak to us. So yes, there is a multitude of personalities that may be involved in our life for our progress from point A to point B. But the only way they would actually be able to help us do that depends on our faith in them. Otherwise, we can't progress at all. Our doubts will not allow us to do so. So that has to be considered, just the faith in the individual. Sometimes I feel that in stressing the kind of, this is for lack of a better language, in stressing the managerial setup, we might forget the actual spiritual substance that is required for the improvement of individuals, namely the combination of spiritual understanding on the side of those who are leaders. Do they understand the Siddhanta, the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, to the degree that they can remove the doubts of the followers? It can't just be the gist, and every time you come with a question that they can't answer, then they say, you just have to be faithful, or something like that. And then the doubts of the individual just skyrocket, from there. They have to be edified in order to remove the doubts of the disciples. That's what the verse says, Shabda Pare Chanishnatam. Shabda Pare. Pare means Krishna, and Shabda means the sound. So they're fully aware of the sound, that means the scriptures. Theoretically, they fully understood them, they understood the conclusions, by which they're able to remove the doubts of the disciples. That's how Srila Prabhupada is taught. That is important from their side, and from the side of the disciples, let's say, the subordinates, or then their faith is the criteria. That is the actual spiritual substance of the relationships, the faith on the side of the individual, and then the spiritual edification on the side of the leader. Just having persons they've been around longer and this is the managerial structure, that will be fine for managing and keeping just the basic formal institution together, but that won't do much in terms of the inner life of the individuals if they don't have faith, and if the individuals they're looking to don't have the spiritual understanding. Then it'll be formed without substance, and it will fall apart eventually. So don't forget about those points. Yeah. Community Prabhu wants to.
Hare Krishna. Here in the purport, there is a line you can see that Prabhupada has written. That means the king that they very readily agreed to part with a sixth of their pious activities for his benefit in the next life. I was wondering for what is that sixth part? The king was parting with, the sixth part of their pious activity.
Yeah.
Is it like that, the Brahmins like equipped with 6 types of work like jajan, jajan, patan, patan?
No, not like
Is
that.
it one of that?
No, not like that. That's not my understanding of that. It just means you can't quantify it because we first of all you don't know how much pious activities they're doing. So how the way numbers works in Vedic culture usually is just to help you get an idea of something. Just like for example, it may say something to the degree that I heard this actually from Bhaktivedanta Purna Maharaj. It says something that women are 4 times more clever than men. Although it's mentioned that women are less intelligent, but it says they're 4 times more clever than men. So, but what does that mean, that they're 4 times more clever? The idea of that expression is to say, don't try it. don't be foolish to try something. They're more clever than you. That's the idea. Or when in the Bhagavad Gita, Sanjay says, when he sees the universal form of the Lord, he said it is like 10,000 or 1 million suns rising in the sky at the same time. Now, what does that look like? One cannot even imagine, but that number is just a given expression to the something that's very subtle and practically inconceivable to understand. So similarly, when it says 1/6 of their pious activities, we can't know how much pious activities they're doing. The idea is that whatever pious activities they're doing, a part of that is going to the welfare of the king on account of his piety. But that's too subtle to understand. And the number is itself just to give an expression to something very subtle and inconceivable. That's how I've understood that particular point. You get what I'm saying? It's too subtle to quantify. Just like another example, the spiritual world is 3/4 of the existence, and the material world is 1/4 of the existence. Right? We hear this, ekapad vibhuti, tripad vibhuti. But what is 1/4 of infinity? What's 1/4 of infinity? It's infinity also, right? So the idea in saying that is just to give expression that spiritual existence makes up most of what exists, and material existence makes up just a small portion of it. But 1/4 of infinity is also infinity. You know, you can't quantify it, but it's just to give an expression to something very subtle and practically impossible to express in language. So, and similarly, that's my understanding of that particular. They give 1/6 of that. It's just like karma. You can't trace out karmic activities. Like, okay, I got this reaction. What did I do in my previous life to get this reaction? You will never be able to figure that out. It's impossible. Because in one lifetime, you're doing so many activities, and they're all getting their karmic due. So you can't know where it's coming from. So when we speak about karma, we speak about it only as a principle. Because you cannot know the details of it, that's impossible. So similarly also here with pious activities. How many pious activities? We don't know. But whatever pious activities they're doing, a portion of that is going toward the king. It's just giving a numerical figure to try to give expression to something very subtle and hard to understand. That's the way I'm understanding that particular point.
But at the same time, most of the activities, they are divided into 6 parts. For the Brahmans, especially.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah,
so
no, but that has no connection. Yeah, that has no connection. Oh, he's saying different thing. Yeah, that's a... Well, he was asking a different thing. He's saying there's 6 activities of the Brahmanas to teach. Yeah, but those two points are actually disconnected. Those are not the same. That's not the same element. Yes. Yeah, that's the point you're trying to make? No.
Part of 6 in the translation also there, in the purport also Prabhupada wrote that really agreed to part with a sixth of their past activities for the,
Yes.
to part with a sixth of their past activity.
Yes.
That's what you told, like
Yes.
nice,
See, if
nice
we're
example.
trying to look at it, if we try to look at it very gross, then you're not gonna be able to get it. It's something. It's a subtle expression. It's just like, how do you try to describe how you love your wife? It's very difficult to put it into language, and the only way you can try to do it is by speaking poetry, and the poetry gives an indication of the type of love you have for your wife, but it doesn't really tell me much about how deep that love actually goes, because it's too subtle to express. It's just an attempt. So if you're trying to look at it in a very gross way, then we might get misunderstanding. It's a very subtle idea. That's how I'm understanding it according to what I've heard.
If I'm understanding correctly, that makes sense. Only small doubt in my mind is that when we do a Parashipata or something, we've been told that if you dedicate it to someone else consciously, then you get more return. So my question is, I'm wondering if their consciousness is somehow through the prayers and things that may assist us to be for the king. I'm asking.
Well, it doesn't mention that they pray, but anyway, even if they pray May 6 for this, or 6 of I dedicate this to my spiritual master and so on, and then the returns become more. You can't understand what that is. You can't understand the amount of returns that would have been there had you not dedicated it versus the amount of returns that are coming because you dedicated it. The idea is that, yes, there's well-wishing for the king, and they're blessing him. That's the idea, because he is favoring them by his proper activities as a king, so they're showing favor toward him by blessing him. They're partying with the sticks of their activity. That's how it's being expressed. So this is very subtle. If you try to quantify it, then you're going to get bewildered.
Hare Krishna. Isn't it, I've heard another translation for Maya is like measurement, to measure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, it seems like a subtle way of like lording it over is this always measuring, and like the scientists, they have to measure, they want to measure the universe and all those things.
Sure. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
I already got the screws in place. Just want you to just hold it like this, and I want to just mark it. I want to put the screws in. Okay, thank you. Thank you kindly. Got so many books now.